few people recently have asked me to do a mixing breakdown and specifically to tailor it onto the end of the Paradox series. So firstly, I just want to talk a little bit about the mindset of it all. And for me, I really have to split up mixing and sound design and production in my head a little bit. I think for mixing, it's quite good to have a bit of a process that you go through and that you can repeat every time, and a bit of a strategy for how you attack your mixes. Whereas with production and sound design, I think it's much more beneficial to be really creatively free to try anything with plugins and have loads of crazy modulations and do whatever you want. And so when I get to mixing, I'm really just focusing on balance mainly, and then panning and compression and EQ and kind of problem solving. And so those things really fall under the mixing umbrella for me, and I try and separate these things in my head a little bit. And I think that really helps me get through this mixing process. And if I just show you here, I've got this Amen break, and what I kind of mean is this Amen break was already heavily processed. I'd layered it, I'd done a whole bunch of stuff in Logic just to this break specifically before I even brought it into Renoise. So a lot of that stuff you see other people doing mixing, you're not really going to see me do, because I kind of include that in the production and sound design stages of making a track. So you can hear this Amen is already sounding pretty good, and it's layered and slammed, and I've just done a lot of that before I've even brought it into the project, and this just helps me with my speed of working in Renoise. Okay, so before we get into any of the actual mixing stuff, I want to show you two tools that I think are really helpful. One is a free Renoise tool, and it's actually called Mix Balancer, and I think if you set it to all faders, and you can hit plus and minus on all faders, and you can gain headroom. So if I do this, all of the actual individual tracks like this one, they all go down one, but the actual buses don't go down. So I can get myself to a good headroom level where I'm not going to be clipping everything, but I'm not going to change the balance of the mix. And so Mix Balancer is a really good plugin which is free from in the Renoise tools. And then the other one which is so good is this AB Metric, and this is from Plugin Alliance, and you can probably catch this on a deal for about 30 quid, but it's probably the most essential mixing and mastering plugin that I have, because it's just such a good way to compare between two tracks. I'm not really going to go too much into this plugin, but I use this all the time for referencing, and referencing, especially if you're struggling with your mixing, it's the biggest thing that's helped me improve my mixes, because you've actually got something to aim for, like with your bass levels or with the brightness of your track, and you can hear if your track's sounding really lackluster compared to your reference, you at least have some idea of where you need to go or what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so the first thing I've got to do here is actually do some basic balancing. In order to do your basic balancing, one really good thing you need to do is actually to group up all of your tracks. So I'm going to go Command G to group it, and then I can create like a master effects one, and then I can put this inside of this. Okay, that's working better. Let's color this up. So I've got rises, effects, all my vocals, instruments, and then there's two bass things here. Okay, so now I've done all my grouping, and I've got my drum breaks on a main one, my instrument, vox and effects on another with all the subgroups under them, and then my bass on another one. Now what I'm really using here is Command Shift and J to open and collapse these groups here, but then Command Shift and K will actually reveal the controls for the layer. So it's quite useful if you want to just create a really organized area to mix from in Renoise and not have it look too crazy, is using those two hotkeys to organize everything. So at this stage, I don't really want to give you any conflicting advice, and I actually think Dan Worrell has a really good video about how loud should you make your drums. The most important thing here is actually to set your drums as an anchor and then not to change their level. And you want to pick a LUFS level or a RMS level where you're going to have enough space to mix all the other elements into your track, and that's not going to start clipping the master. And that's the real goal here of setting this level. But anyway, he says to set it at -23 LUFS. So if I have this meter up here, so I've got my drum level now very close to -23, and this is going to be a lot quieter than you will usually mix, but it's just to give you a lot of headroom, so you're never going to have problems with clipping your master by the time you've got all your mixing done. Okay, so there's a point I really want to stress here because I think it's really important, and what it is we set our drum breaks to be at this -23 LUFS level, and then you actually turn up your monitoring level so that that's a good listening level as well. Not too loud that you're going to fatigue your ears out. And now the thing is, you're not going to change this monitoring level at all. What we're going to do is mix all of our tracks into that drum break. And if we start to lose clarity in the mix, or we start to lose the drum break, that's because the other elements are too loud, or there's frequency clashing, or there's other problems going on. And so you kind of set your anchor. And the reason it's called an anchor is because we're not going to move it. We're just going to set it there, and we're going to mix everything else into that. And I think that's a really important thing, just to get your kind of structure of your mixes right, is setting this anchor point and mixing into that. Okay, so I've just been playing with this match level thing a little bit, just to get these two really balanced. And so now I can hear that my drums are getting pretty close to how his is sounding now. I could do maybe a little bit more limiting on them or something like that later on, but they're pretty close in level anyway. And so I'm going to start to build up all these other instruments around it. So the next thing I've gone to is actually the vocal here. And we get to hear my lovely girlfriend's vocals again now. Sometimes you would put the vocals right at the front of a mix, but actually I think I mixed these more in the background. So maybe I just leave that there and come to some of the instruments. Have I got any instruments in this bit? So I can hear loads of like low mid energy coming in, especially in this like Atmos layer. And I'm using Command and backslash to solo this layer. So it's quite distorted, this. I think that's just how it was in the beginning. And this is something, a problem I actually encounter a lot, is like, I have a pad in my mix which is giving me loads of low mid energy, but it seems to clutter everything up. But when I take away too much of this like muddy area around here, that starts to clean it up actually quite a lot. And so this is a problem that you're always going to have, and when everything's banging down the middle, you get much more frequency clashing. But if you can have some certain things panned, like this pad definitely doesn't need to be in the middle. Sometimes I do that like trick where you can just delay one side, but I don't know what plugin I would do. Oh yeah, I have a delay. I reckon you can just do like native delay in here. Yeah, so if you just get a delay plugin, no feedback. That can be on 1 millisecond, and that can be like 200 milliseconds. And then it spreads it. If I solo this layer, it gets it out to the sides and just gets it out of the way of everything else in the middle. So I can even turn it down a little bit now. Another thing is this stereo imager is a good way of spreading something evenly. I'm fighting some of these elements to make it sound warm, but I also want the drums out in front. And this is a thing I almost always encounter. It starts to lose clarity to gain warmth, and this is something you're just gonna have to fight with. And it's really about the balance of the elements, panning things out to the side and controlling low mid mud. And you really just got to pick certain things and choose certain things that you want to prioritize. And for instance, this pad, when I take it out, I gain a lot of clarity, but when I bring it in, it's got all that warmth and vibe of the track. So this is the element that I'm really fighting here to get at the right level. So I've got two different instruments that are happening in call and response right now from the digitone. And so I'm panning them left and right here. and then having another one come in straight. So I'm going like left, right, straight, and just kind of panning stuff around. It makes stuff sound interesting, but it actually gives you space in the mix as well. That's got loads of low energy in that vocal that's just really getting crazy. Always cutting all this low end stuff away on anything that I don't need, especially effects and stuff where you can, so you get all of this stuff running down, but it's not affecting the sound at all to cut it away. Might even be able to cut some of that off. And so the last thing I've really got to do now is just mix in my bass. So I want these basses to be quite exaggerated. Let's open these up a little bit. So these like emu basses just want to be really fat, and like they definitely poke even out in front of the drums. But because what they really are is like super distorted basses, they don't have too much crazy low end taking up the headroom. They're more like a mid-range bass, and so you can have them quite fat in the mix. So that's really how I would approach mixing a track like this. And for me, it's really about setting that anchor point is the most important thing. So setting your drum break, giving yourself a bit of headroom, and then mixing everything against the drum bus. And also the other really important thing is to have a reference track. And if I show you now my track against his, I haven't done any mastering to mine yet, but I've got a lot closer to his mix than I had in the beginning. And if I was going to be really critical, I would say that Paradox's mix actually has like a bit more vibe than mine, and he's got a really fat low end kick. If you listen, he's got this kick layered under his kick, and that's quite hard to mix. It's obviously taking up a lot of space in the mix. So I think I've maybe got a little bit more clarity than Paradox, especially in the low mids, but he's got a bit more vibe, and that's just the style he's gone for there. But we've got very similar kind of mixes going on here. Anyway, so I'm pretty happy with that, and I hope this has been a useful insight into my mix process. And what I will always do is go File, Save As, and you can see like I have, even here, I've got all these copies of this track I originally was doing. And so I will save, when I get to this mixing point, I will save a copy of the project. And then I think for this Paradox track, I did maybe 2 or 3 attempts at mixing it, and maybe just gave myself an hour or 2 to get through the mix, and then compared them all and kind of picked the best ones out of that. So yeah, multiple mixes, and just don't be scared of it. Just get stuck in and give it a go, and reference and set an anchor point, and hopefully all of those tools will help you in your future productions and mixdowns. So yeah, I'll catch you very soon on this channel, and keep well till then. Peace.